Well, Nicholas, we're live.
Very cool. Hello, everyone.
Welcome. So we'll just chill out here a few minutes. We're waiting for some people to come in. And while we're doing so, I'm going to ask Nicholas a couple personal questions just to get a feel for who he is and what he likes to do. So I asked Nicholas before the show what's something interesting about him that most people probably wouldn't know. And he said he likes to age his own meat. Tell us about that, Nicholas.
Yeah, so dry aging meat is when you basically let a meat sit out and get moldy for a month or two, but it tastes really good. So what it does is the mold almost breaks down the muscle fibers in the meat and also changes the taste a little bit. And then at the end of the 30 days, 45 days, you have this disgusting looking thing. And once you cut off all the mold and grossness, you have this beautiful piece of meat. So most steak restaurants, dry aging. So most steak restaurants, if you go to like a fancy restaurant, that's what they all do.
Really?
Yeah. So any big restaurant, it's normally 28 days or 35 days. And the longer you wait, the more you have to cut off from the meat. And so they typically don't go past, 35 days or so. But I actually dry aged a piece of meat 90 days once. And it was very interesting.
That is totally interesting. So did you just put it out on the back porch or like does it
No. So I have a special fridge I keep in the garage. The temperature has to be very specific. So it's within like a couple degrees. Otherwise the meat could go bad. You need the right amount of airflow. You need to control humidity. If it's too humid, you have risk of growing bad mold on the meat and then you have to throw it away. Not enough humidity and it tastes like jerky. So it's an interesting process and it's a slow one to test because, each testing cycle is only 3 months.
That was like we did some rock tumbling with my kids not too long ago. It's just like they were so excited to they wanted to open it up and see the shiny rocks the next day, but we had to do like 4 different cycles of days and weeks each. So I get that. Do you have to do a certain bacteria on it or any type of? You just stick it in there.
You just stick it in there. You clean it. I clean it, dry it, and then put it in there. Some people use things like vinegar to make sure they're killing, anything on the surface to make sure, they have a higher chance of success. But for me, just rinse it, clean it, dry it, and put it in there and hope for the best.
Man, that's cool. Congratulations on that unique hobby. One more question before we get into the intro and the session. Dream job, what would it be?
I love food and my wife loves food. And so like our goal is to go and just eat amazing food all over the world. And so I think for me, it would be, I don't know, some kind of food critic, food blogger, just get to go around from country to country eating incredible, local cuisine and getting to talk about it. That's pretty much every dinner with my wife is like a Master Chef episode where we're just sitting there and talking about what we love about the dish, and we're just always blown away by how incredible these chefs are. So that's my big dream job, I think.
What's some of the best food you've ever tasted aside from the aged meat?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. There's a lot of incredible restaurants in Seattle, and I went to one not too long ago. And this is going to sound like such a cop-out, but like they have the most amazing oysters up in Seattle. So maybe not a cooked dish per se, but it was absolutely incredible. But there was a Japanese restaurant we went to last year where they I don't know what they put on the oysters, but it was so good. I dream about them all the time.
In a good way, right? Not like
in a very good way.
And the oysters are trying to eat me kind of way, right?
Exactly.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm excited to hear Nicholas's presentation. This was a presentation he gave, an extended version of a presentation he gave at BrightonSEO recently. And there were so many sessions there that I wasn't able to attend. So I'm glad he offered to present this for us. So just as we're going along, feel free to put comments, questions in the chat. We're going to let them record all the way through like it was a presentation at Brighton, so we can have a recording of that. But we'll bring in the questions at the end. So make sure as you're going along, as you think of them, put them in the chat and we'll shoot them at him at the end. There's going to be a lot of good stuff. Some of the stuff he's added I'm excited to see. So let me introduce Nicolas, in case you don't know him. He's the founder of Kixly, which is the world's most accurate predictive SEO platform. Nicolas has been doing data products for nearly a decade, and he's worked for companies like Amazon, Microsoft, eBay in various product marketing analytic roles. Nicolas also is currently with Kixly. He's excited to share with companies how to apply machine learning and AI to their SEO strategies, which is very timely. The stuff he's talking about is stuff that I haven't heard people talking about. It's very unique and very relevant. So let's give a warm welcome to Nicolas, and take it away, Nicolas.
Thanks, Arent. Let me go and share my screen and see how well this works. Great. So keywords aren't dead. It's just complicated. Like Ryan mentioned, this was a talk I gave in Brighton, San Diego last month. And when I was putting together this talk, I had a bunch of ideas coming into it about the direction I wanted to take it. But I didn't have a lot of data to support those hypotheses. And so a lot of this deck is really digging into the data to help prove or disprove some of these inherent thoughts and ideas that have been surfacing around the industry. So at nothing else, you're going to get to see some really unique and new data points that haven't really been shared in the industry. It'll be about 25 minutes, so let's just jump right in. This entire presentation is about two things. One, exploring the idea that keywords aren't dead. We've been hearing this for the last 10 years, whether it's on social media like LinkedIn or Twitter, on popular industry news articles, and it's very timely. There's a lot of talk about Google's deep understanding of semantical language, their ability to mathematically understand the distance between different words and phrases. They came out with Word to Vec in 2013 and BERT in 2018. And so even though this is a new thing that just really been surfacing in the industry, it's something that's been going on for over 10 years now. And as a result of that, a lot of people feel like keywords are dead. And there's not a lot of purpose or reason to go and try and find keyword opportunities, because Google has such a good understanding that really the way to do it is content clusters. Just create a bunch of great content and hope it ranks and hope it ranks. And eventually we get rewarded by Google, and some of it does. Now, I think that strategy really was kind of derived from the fear and doubt that was created from just our lack of understanding of the algorithm. And I think we need to get back to our basics. We need to get back to our origins of creating great content where there wasn't great content. And that's really where we started. And I also think we give Google a little too much credit. On one hand, we cement them as this sophisticated corporation that understands deep semantic language and technical aspects and have built this incredible product with Google search. But at the same time, they're the same people who rolled out the AI overviews, telling people to put sandpaper on their pizza and whatnot. So I think we need to really balance our thoughts and perspectives on Google's abilities. And in this talk, I'm going to share a little more about that. The second is we really need to do more. We need to flex some muscles that we've not really done in the past, like data science and statistical evaluation. There's billions of blog posts being created every year. And so when you're about to write that 500th article on how to calculate retention for a SaaS application, I need you to stop and think and say, hey, is this really going to provide value for me? Because we don't work for Google. Everything we do should be cemented in the fact that we're trying to provide value for our organization and our clients. And by doing so, that's really what moves the needle. And so that's what we really need to focus on. Now, a little bit about me. I live in Seattle, Washington. I have two amazing kids who don't sleep in. Run a marketing and analytics agency. I'm the founder of Kixly, the world's most accurate predictive SEO platform. And if there's one thing I hate more than anything else, it's doing things that don't matter. It's painful. It's expensive. We lose trust in our peers. We lose confidence and purpose. It sucks. I hate it. Nothing more I hate than doing things that don't matter. And I probably chose the wrong industry because SEO is really, really hard. And more than not, a lot of the things we do happen to not matter. It's like we're playing a board game, but someone else is holding the rule book. And it's hard to not do things that matter. And the bigger problem is SEO takes a village. We rely on engineers for technical implementation. We rely on copywriters to create content. We rely on designers to help improve the user experience. We rely on legal to make sure we're not going to get in trouble. We rely on our executive team to give us the time we need to implement our strategies and get the value that we're trying to extract from Google and other search engines. And how are we supposed to do that? How are we supposed to build trust when we fail so often? If you look at any major survey in the SEO space, the number one problem you'll find is this idea of collaboration and resources and trust. How do we build trust when 90% of the content just doesn't rank, doesn't provide any traffic? And that's why it matters for me, because for me, I don't want to be a fail. I don't want to fail 97% of the time. It sucks. And so this whole presentation, it's going to be about the stop trusting the process. Go against the grain. Get back to the basics. Stop creating content for the sake of content clusters. Stop ignoring keyword research because keywords are dead, and really start to question everything. And through all this, I hope you'll walk away with this idea that we need to fill content gaps. Get back to the basics. Be a detective. And yeah, it's easy to say 3 words on a slide. Oh, gee, thanks, Nick. Like, yeah, let's go find content gaps. And I promise I'll cover exactly how to do that. But before we do that, I want to focus on this idea that keywords aren't dead, because that core thesis changes how we find content gaps. And if we don't believe keywords are dead, then that changes how we approach the entire problem. So let's get into this idea. Are keywords dead? So for over 10 years, we've been seeing articles, posts on LinkedIn, all telling us keywords are dead. And every single time Google rolls out an algorithm update, everyone runs to Google and searches, are keywords dead? And reads all these articles about how keywords are worthless. And SEO is not about keywords anymore. And that's not just my opinion. Go to Google Trends. 31 times in the last 10 years, we've seen a spike for people searching, are keywords dead? And every single one of them aligns with Google algorithm updates. I actually gave up labeling this chart because there's just not enough space and not enough time. And honestly, it didn't matter at that point. Like, the point is made. It's crazy how human psychology works. It's crazy how consistent we are with every time an algorithm update rolls out. But at the same time, I don't know if they really left us. If you look at the chart circled in blue, it shows that keyword research continues to become more and more popular. And depending on how much you believe the Google Trends data, Google's doubled in the popularity of SEO keyword research has doubled in the last 5 years. So we can't believe keywords are dead, but also think that keyword research is the cat's meow. And so I had a hypothesis. And the hypothesis was simple. If Google understands semantical relationships so well, then if I found 2 nearly identical terms, then the search results should also be very similar. So what I did was I found these 2 terms, best coffee makers and top coffee makers. From a human judgment perspective, they're nearly identical. From a mathematical perspective, using cosine similarity scores, a similar approach to how Google computes the similarity of different phrases and words and sentences. And through their eyes, it's also very similar. Now, cosine similarity score is a score that represents the similarity of a sentence, a phrase, a word. And so things like man and woman are related, bunny and rabbit, and understanding mathematically the distance between those. Now, before I get into the actual results, I wanted to look at the overall structure of the SERP. Now, funny enough, 3 weeks before the talk, the SERPs were completely different. Some of them had PLA, some of them didn't. Some of them had text ads, some of them didn't. But the morning of the presentation, things changed. The SERP results looked nearly identical. But when I say nearly identical, it's because one thing stood out still, the organic results. If I look at the SERP for these 2 terms, what I found was they both shared the same 2 organic results, the New York Times and Epicurious. Those 2 were consistent, number 1 and 2 across both terms, both SERPs. US News was also consistent, although it was ranked differently. But every other blue link on that page was different. Why is that? If these terms are so similar, why are the results so different? That's quite a bit of a shuffle. But I didn't just do this for one. I didn't cherry pick it. I went and came up with 500 different keyword pairs and did the exact same thing. I found terms that were nearly identical in terms of their phrasing and intent, that were nearly identical from a cosine similarity score perspective, And what I found was over 70% of the time, the number one result was different. On top of that, not only just the number one result, but 70% of the URLs in the top 10 between those two pairs were different. So I think we're giving Google a little bit too much credit here. And if you've worked in the machine learning space, it makes a lot of sense. Handling sparse data is really, really hard. Trying to group similar keywords and apply similar functions to them is a really, really hard problem. So that's the first big takeaway. Keyword rankings are nearly identical queries are very, very different. This idea that keywords are dead because of Google's deep understanding of semantic relationships of words and phrases, I think that's more aspirational than actual reality. And for the time being, I think we need to approach this problem that way. So if keywords aren't dead, then it brings us back to this idea that we need to be detectives, we need to find content gaps, and we need to close them. It means maybe we shouldn't write that 500th article about how to measure retention in a SaaS application, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't write it. It just means that we need to think critically about what kind of value it'll create if we write that piece of content. And for us, that means figuring out, will it actually rank and drive traffic? And if the answer to that is yes, then we should write it. And if the answer to that is no, we should think about whether or not we actually should. And how do you figure that out? Keyword difficulty scores. I'm just kidding. The joke lands a little bit better on a stage. People laughed, I promise. But I've always felt keyword difficulty scores are lacking in accuracy, analytical rigor, but that was like just my opinion. And there's other people who felt very similarly. Again, opinions, no data, but it's very clear there's a large number of people in the industry who don't believe in keyword difficulty scores, but I haven't seen any data to prove or disprove that. And so I came up with my own methodology. I came up with a list of relevant keywords for a given industry. I measured the semantic similarity of the page titles of the ranking page to make sure that they were highly relevant to that query. So we're doing an apples to apples comparison. And then I graphed it across 3 axes. Where did they rank? How difficult was it to rank based on the difficulty scores? And what was the cosine similarity between the keyword and the query to make sure we were comparing these things? Now, there are some issues and limitations with this analysis, so it's not perfect, but I think it does a pretty good job of helping us understand, our keyword difficulty score is something we in the industry should actually be using. And my hypothesis is that we should see this strong relationship between where things rank in Google and how difficult the keyword is. Meaning, if I'm a brand and I have a list of 100 keywords, I should have a much better position in Google for those keywords where the difficulty is low and a much higher position when the difficulty is high. What I found was that's not the case. What I found was that in 4 of these brands for that one industry, it seemed almost random. Every single one of these, you would expect this relationship, but it's not. It didn't matter the difficulty of the keyword. You saw some in position 1, some in position 10, some in position 30 or more. And so I think we need new tools. We need to find new ways to find content gaps because that's not keyword difficulty scores. And through that, I think we need to just stop trusting that process of creating content. We need to find better ways. And that starts with evolving in our approach. So let's talk about keyword clusters. Keyword clusters is this idea that if we create a bunch of content for a single topic and it links all together and we cover all the different areas that Google might expect us to cover, eventually Google will reward us with rankings and we'll thank our Google overlords for sending us our traffic, and we'll continue to do that. And so we create a bunch of content, we link it all together, we have all this, and then bam. Some of it ranks and gets traffic and things are great. Other pages, maybe not so much. And it feels a little bit like we're playing Minesweeper here, right? We're just throwing things out there and hoping some of this will work. And we start to question is maybe we shouldn't have created some of those articles that don't rank to begin with. Like maybe there's better resources spent elsewhere. And so there's this famous quote from John Wanamaker. He says, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half." And I think that's very akin to what we're doing in the SEO space. 97% of the content I plan on creating is wasted. Trouble is, I don't know which half. And if we spent down breaking down the signals that we believe to be important in Google, that we believe is important in their algorithm, we can start to think critically about why some of those articles didn't rank. Was it because we didn't have enough topical authority? Was the quality of the content not high enough? Did we not have enough internal links? Was the page speed so slow? And if we can start to figure those things out, maybe we can start to model where and how we should be creating content. So let's talk about keyword research. And we can't talk about keyword research without talking about statistics. And this is before when I said we need to get more sophisticated. I think it starts with all of us becoming a little bit of a data scientist. And I know that's a little scary and it feels uncomfortable. But with the help of things like GPT, I think you'll start to realize you have the ability to do all of this. And so it's it is using data to inform where content gaps exist and then figuring out how to close them. And how do you quantify content gaps? Well, we can look for signals like quality, relevance, things like experience, looking at page speed. You can look at things like your own authority, whether it's the number of backlinks you have, your brand's relationship to a given topic. But keep in mind, we don't work for Google. We don't work for free. So when we create content, we do it with the purpose of ranking and driving value. Now, input data isn't perfect. Statistics isn't perfect. It's more probabilistic than anything. And so human judgment is critically important in all of this. And we have to combine the two. So it doesn't have to be really complicated. You can start with a Google Sheet, come up with a set of signals, review the SERPs for those signals, look for patterns and heuristics. What percentage of the top 3 have, more backlinks than everyone else? How important is quality relative to position ranking? Look for things like correlations and things like that. But if you have the team and you have the skills, I say you should consider things like machine learning. And in machine learning, there's 3 critical steps. And the first is building a data pipeline. The next is training the model. And finally is making the predictions. And I'm going to walk you through each one of these steps and what I think we should be doing from an SEO perspective to use machine learning to identify gaps in the SERPs and close them with quality content. So the first is building a data pipeline. Now, there's a near infinite number of signals and ideas that you might have in terms of what you think is important when Google determines rankings. Quality is obviously one of them, but there's other things we can get from APIs and simple analyses that you and your team can build. You can get your page speed data from Google PageSpeed. The API is 100% free. You can get backlink data from Moz or SEMrush. You can compute content relevance similar to what I did earlier, looking at semantic similarity of the title, of the content. You can measure topical authority with things like n-grams analysis across your entire site, which is something similar to what Google does to determine site scores for given queries. And things like page freshness. You can scrape the schema, look for last updated or modified dates, things like that. And again, like I said earlier, you don't have to do this all yourself. Here's an example where I asked GPT to compute a semantic similarity score between with a CSV with 2 columns, keyword and page title. And it was perfect. The code was absolutely perfect. And so I think regardless of how proficient you are in Python, these LLM technologies have gotten more advanced enough where you can, as long as you can ask it, you'll get the code that will closely resemble what you're trying to do. It goes back to machine learning. The next step is training the model. And again, that's a really simple one, right? That's just grabbing the SERP ranking data. And you can do that manually. You can use any number of the APIs. If you Google SERP API, you'll find tons of different solutions out there that are all relatively cheap and affordable. And then the last step is to make predictions. So trying to predict where you could rank based on a different set of criteria. Now, when you make the predictions, you can use things like decision trees, neural networks, regressions. There's a lot of different types of models, but those 3 are probably going to get you farther than anything. And you can use Scikit-learn, which is a Python machine learning open source package where you can basically train and run a machine learning model in about 3-5 lines of Python code. And again, ChatGPT can effectively write 99% of that code for you. Now, if you do that, and I'm not going to share this online, but feel free to reach out, you'll find it actually performs reasonably well. I share this during the talk, and I'll share that privately with people who reach out. But you'll find that if you go with this approach, even at a most basic level, it'll give you some pretty strong predictive power to be able to make a lot of these decisions. So keywords aren't dead. We just need to evolve with them. Now, this is the second part of the presentation that wasn't shared at Brighton. And we're really going to go into how you apply some of this predictive SEO work to help generate value within your own organizations. I was limited in time during the talk at Brighton, and so I didn't want to go too deep into this. And a lot of this is based on the product angle that we do at Kixley. And so that's really where we're going to focus. And so, again, the founder of Kixley, we're the world's most accurate predictive SEO platform. If you Google predictive SEO platform, you'll find us. And the big question I get when I tell people that is, well, what is predictive SEO? And if you Google it, what you find is you get an AI overview and some articles that really just tell us it's about finding keywords that are going to be searched more often in the future. So think of the 2024 election. It's like creating content ahead of that, or seeing the Tamagotchi craze happening and creating a bunch of content before that gets too big, so you can cement yourself as the experts in the world of Tamagotchi. And if you look at Google Trends, you'll see that no one's really searching or doing anything with predictive SEO. It's not the most exciting chart, but even if you isolate it to just predictive SEO, again, you get effectively no data from Google. And I think that's because that definition needs to evolve, because it doesn't have to just be about keywords. What we need to refocus it is focus on outcomes. So rather than predicting what keywords will have higher volume in the future, what we really need to be doing is predicting what will happen in Google based on changes I want to make. Because we can't keep doing things that don't move the needle. We don't work for Google. They don't pay us. We need to do things that serve us, serve our organizations. And the only way to do that is to understand what will actually matter. And I think the way we do that is with predictive SEO. And then again, goes back to training machine learning models unique to our site, to our topical areas. Now, Kixley, we have a platform that uses over 200 different signals, from site speed to content quality to information gain. But again, you don't need 200 signals for this to be an effective exercise for you and your organization. You can come up with a few signals around content quality, content relevance, content topical authority, backlinks, internal links. And once you do that, it goes back to what I shared earlier. Find content gaps and fill them. And here's how you do that. Collect the data, identify patterns, use those patterns to find gaps. Here's an example. We do this for a single keyword, and we look for a weakness. We give Google a reason to rank us higher. So create those signals: quality, relevance, backlinks, topical authority. Manually review the results for the top 20 results and score them. Doesn't have to be perfect. You have a team, work with your team. If you want to be more sophisticated, use heuristics, use statistics, use things to help score these things in a more programmatic way. And what you'll find is a couple things. One, the best content doesn't always rank. And that's because Google's mind, they're not incentivized to show the best content. They're incentivized to show good content with high reliability. And the reliability part's really, really important. Now, there are outliers. You can't just do this for one SERP. But if you start doing this for hundreds or even thousands of keywords, you can start to do pattern matching. And that's what we do at Kixley. So what you do is you use machine learning models to identify how important are these different signals in ranking high for your area. Now, like I said, humans, not very good at pattern matching. We're okay at it, I guess, but machine learning models, that's literally what they were born to do. They were created to identify patterns in the data and use those patterns to predict outcomes. It's very similar to what we're doing here. And so this is the first application, creating new content. So when you run this model, and you follow this approach, what you can do is you'll end up having an output that tells you what keywords you want to rank for, where you currently rank, and then you use the model to predict where you would rank in Google if you overwrite things like relevance and quality. And once you know that, you can start to predict how much value you would generate from writing that article. Where exactly would you rank? How much traffic value does that generate? Because once you know where you rank, you can estimate a click-through rate, and you can use your organization's paid search data to understand how much you're paying for that same traffic, or you can use industry benchmarks to do something similar. And now you know where to not waste your time. So if I'm Indeed.com, I'm not writing resume tips for 2024 because that's only going to generate me $300 worth of traffic value. I'm not going to rank in the top 10. I'm not going to drive any meaningful value. How to write a resignation letter. Again, I'm going to generate an additional $125 in traffic value, a waste of my time, a waste of my organization's time. We're not doing it. We don't work for Google. At the same time, we've identified opportunities where there's huge value in creating high quality, highly relevant content. Now, to create high quality content, it actually takes a lot of work. And if you talk to any content marketer, they'll tell you the amount of time and effort it takes to create something that's really unique, high quality, engaging, and actually going to move your customers along from just reading your article to actually taking an action you want. But those are expensive, and you need to make sure you're spending the right amount of time relative to the opportunity. So again, now we have 4 different opportunities where we can generate thousands of dollars in traffic value for creating new content. How to prepare for a job interview. We predict they currently rank 80th. Their model predicts they can rank 5th. Great. Now I know to go focus on that. Right? It goes back to finding content gaps and filling them, but doing it in a way where we know it's going to provide value for our organization. Now, the second is content optimization. So again, let's go back to that example. You have this SERP, we have these 4 signals, and here's us ranking 4th. And our relevance, we score it yellow. There's some numerical value associated to that. But what if we improve the relevance of that article, right? There's an amount of time and effort it takes to do that, but should we actually do it? Is it worth it? And so what we do is we have this model now trained on our data. It's trained on the algorithm relevant to our space, and it understands the importance of all these signals. And so we overwrite that in our underlying data. We overwrite the relevance and say, actually, now our article had a yellow relevance. Now it's green. Now we have really strong. Will that improve our rankings? And in this example, what we find is, well, we ranked 4th currently, but if we made that change for relevance, it wouldn't actually change our rankings. There's no value in doing that. So again, that's not something the organization should do. At the same time, what we might find is actually if we invest in improving the quality of the content that already exists, we go from ranking 4th to 2nd, and we generate over $4,000 of expected traffic value. That is something our team should do. That is where we should spend time. And when you do this programmatically across thousands of keywords, it becomes really easy to create a roadmap, an SEO roadmap, to ask for resources, to build trust with our organization and get everyone moving in the same direction, because we've applied data, we've applied statistics, and we're doing it based on the latest rankings and the latest algorithm data. So we need to find content opportunities, and we need to prioritize them. Now, there's hundreds of other applications that you can use with predictive SEO, and I don't want to go too far into them, but here's a few next steps that I think you should take. One, if you find this content interesting, if you're interested in getting some code to do this yourself, if you're interested in additional SERP studies in the future, just shoot me an email, get on our mailing list, and when you email me, tell me what you're interested in. What are you looking to learn? That's the best way we'll be able to cater our content to you and to the people who are interested in this type of topic. If you want to try Kicksley, again, just email me. I'd love to give you a demo, talk about how we could apply it in your space, see if it's worth pursuing. And then finally, if you're interested in building a pipeline in-house, you guessed it, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to help out, happy to chat about it. So I'll leave you with one last thought, and that's show me the data. Whenever you have questions, hypotheses, how we arrived to all these conclusions, what we're doing at Kicksley, it's all based on the data. And as an SEO professional, my suggestion to you is to continue to lean in on data, on studies, and follow people who are helping push the industry forward with amazing content and information, all grounded on data. that's all I got.
Well, thanks, Nicholas. This was great. There's data is such a big space, and I think a lot of SEO's experience with SEO is usually like, in spreadsheets and whatnot. So I think that there's some stuff that we can do with this. I got a couple questions. One first from Sally asks, are those examples that you were giving were things from Kixley?
They are. Yeah. So again, we use Kixley to train machine learning models on our clients, and then we predict outcomes, whether it's creating new content, optimizing existing content, changing the targeting of existing pages, all the way to technical updates like should we improve site speed. So yeah, all those examples are grounded on what we do for Kixley.
Great. Another question is, how accurate are the predictive models at this point, and do you foresee increases in the ability to predict more accurately in the future, and what is that based on?
Yeah, so trying to think about how much I can share in this presentation. So they're right now they're extremely accurate. Roughly 65 to 70% of the time, we can predict when a new piece of content is going to rank in the top 10. And we have some other measures around, how often we get it right within 2 or 3 positions on Google that I won't necessarily share publicly, but feel free to reach out. And we're only scratching the surface. Like I said, we have 200 signals, but there's, new signals we're creating every single day that we know are important. So I think it's going to continue to get more and more important, especially as the SERPs get more and more complicated. Google's accelerated the rate at which the SERPs are changing. Anyone who's been following along has just seen how fast things have changed over the last 2 years alone. So I think it's almost a necessary mandate for organizations in the future to be using, any form of statistics to help them make some of these SEO decisions.
Great. And what about in SERPs that are a little more volatile? Like, do you recommend taking a snapshot or putting together one of those charts based on whatever data points that we want to start looking at? Like, what frequency do we want to go back to the SERPs and update that to adjust our model?
Yeah, so I think it depends how you approach the problem. If it's a big manual exercise, it's probably, you need to think what you're going to get out of it, right? So I think for some organizations where it's extremely manual and you're doing it for a large number of SERPs, I think it's probably an exercise you can do, once every 6 to 9 months when Google rolls out a new algorithm update to get a sense of what matters, what doesn't. If you can do it more programmatically, like we can with Kixley, it's probably worth doing on a monthly, bi-monthly cadence. And there's some techniques you can use to kind of be a little smarter about which keywords you use. So for example, you could take those keywords and look at the SERP results, every week for 4 weeks, and then measure some kind of volatility through variance, and then use that to help prioritize and determine, which keywords you're going to do this for and which ones you're not. So I think there's a number of different techniques, and it really kind of gets back to, what your goal is with this exercise. So there's so many different ways you can use this.
Yeah. So going back to the accuracy point, like what do you think needs to be in place for these models to become more accurate in predicting where I could rank given a certain change in my content or a new piece of content?
So I think for me, quality is such an important component of it, right? Like Google understands its goal is to show great content at a high rate of reliability. And so for them to understand the quality of the content is critically important, and continuing to find ways to improve how you measure that. So you could read through it yourself and come up with a quality score. You can measure quality as a function of, hey, these are the expected topics that a piece of article should cover. What do they cover? Do they not? You can use things like information gain. How much unique information is that article provide relative to maybe other articles? And so, you could spend years, trying to measure quality 1,000 different ways, but you don't need to, right? You can start with just a few simple measures and try and kind of build heuristics around that. And same for content relevance. And then authority is another one. Backlinks, authorship. There's so many different ways you can think about it.
Here's a question from JP. Can you give a ballpark timeline for how long it would take to create a data pipeline from start to finish, or would the amount of work vary on a case-by-case basis?
I think it depends how sophisticated you want to be. I mean, for us, we've been working on this for over a year. We have over 200 different signals. Our platform scales really well, but we're doing it at a really sophisticated level. I think, simply put, if you came up with five or six signals around kind of those core areas, quality, relevance, authority, I think you could probably pull some together in a matter of a month, let's say, if you have a data scientist or data engineer kind of supporting you through all this. It's only if you want to really get sophisticated, if you want to do it at a really high scale, that's when it starts to get a little complicated. And a good example of that would be the Google PageSpeed API. Each call takes anywhere from 60 to 90 seconds. And so if you're doing that for 50,000 or 500,000 pages, it could be really time consuming. And so you need to implement strategies like parallel calling. You need to handle failure rates, things like that. So again, it really just depends. At the same time, you can also just rerun the script, right? Like pull out all the keywords you got the page speed for, rerun the script, and keep doing it that way. So the level of sophistication will just really, kind of to your point, JP, vary on a case-by-case basis.
Where are you starting out with a client, or where would a company start out with, say, it seems like the first point we need is a set of keywords, right? Where's that coming from? Do they have sources that they could use already, or is there ways to get specific set for your company if you don't have them already?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's definitely one of the most important aspects of all this. I would say Google Search Console is a gold mine, right? Those are all the queries that you're showing up for. That's one great source. Two, most SEO teams already have a list of keywords that they're focused on, whether it's for their content calendar, whether it's, high priority keywords. Another is to use tools like SEMrush or Moz or Ahref. If you plug in a domain, they tell you what keywords they think are driving traffic for them. So that's another good one. One really important tip, I think, when you think about training these models is if you have only examples where you rank, 10 through 30, the model's not going to understand how you can rank first or second. And so you need to make sure that there's a high degree of variability in terms of all the keyword sets. And so making sure you have examples where you rank first, where you rank second, where you rank third would probably be one tip I would share with anyone in this call who's thinking about doing this.
Great. And what about so this seems like it's on the front end of, like, we're predicting, right, where I'm going to rank and where we're assuming a certain click-through rate, I guess, but like, do you think beyond that, like in terms of, are you using just so the cost per click data of a certain keyword, right, and in a certain position, like are we thinking how many, are we predicting also like how much traffic we can get, or is it just, does it stop at the ranking?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, what we do is we always try and tie it back to dollars, because engineering teams care about, business impact from a dollar perspective. Your leadership team cares at the end of the day about conversions and dollar impact. And so we think about it as, once you know where you're going to rank, you can start to predict how much traffic you're going to get from it. So if you rank first, you're probably going to get maybe 40% of traffic. If you rank second, maybe 20, but then it also gets adjusted based on, is there a map pack? Is there PLA and shopping above you? Is there not? Is there, are you a mortgage calculator? And Google already has the solution already like built in as a widget. And so I think there's some understanding businesses need to do there to understand, what the expected click-through rate is. But at the very basic level, you can just use some of the kind of benchmark data that's out there in terms of click-through rate. I've had some interesting companies say, hey, well, I just want to use my paid search data to figure out, how much I'm paying for that same traffic. And if I can predict the estimated, traffic I'm going to get, I can predict the value of kind of opportunity cost by not spending on Google anymore. And so it's a cost saving exercise, which is really interesting. And Ryan, I know when we chatted about this a little bit last week, you had some really interesting thoughts on kind of like how to even go about that, or how to think about that. I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, well, just drawing a blank on what specifically we're talking about, but I know in my experience, like, I've always been closely tied to the paid campaigns that our companies are working with, even if I'm not, running them. So like overlapping our search data with the paid data, So I can see, we actually have a sheet for this that we can share later if anybody's interested, but it will pull in your paid data, it will pull in your organic data, and it will overlay it to show like where your SEO opportunities are based on the value your paid is providing. And also on the flip side, where we're ranking and bringing in traffic from an SEO side that we may not be advertising on from a paid side. So it's a really cool exercise that way. Is that what you were thinking, or was there?
No, that was it.
Yeah, I think that this is really cool. I like that. There's been a couple times at agencies where we had to go through this exercise of predicting like the value, and it's always been a lot easier for a paid, like a paid group to do this because, they have some data and they can say, well, if we spend this much money, we're going to get this much, we know we can be in these positions and get this much click-through rate. And it's a lot more cut and dry typically. So thinking about how to predict not only our rankings, but beyond that, that was a question I was going to ask too. Like, you mentioned the different SERP features, right? Are your predictive models looking at that, or is it looking at just the organic positioning?
So we've trained ours just on the organic positioning, but we are building out applications for like local SEO for map packs. So can you predict what'll matter to get us to rank, in the map pack? Should we go invest in, getting more reviews? And if so, what kind of impact will that have? PLA we haven't touched yet, but there's huge opportunities there. So it's something we're working on in our roadmap, but right now we're heavily focused on the organic links. And actually, Ryan, I just want to kind of build on top of what you're saying with predicting outcomes. I think, this time of year, everyone's entering and planning, working on resourcing conversations for their organizations. One of the most valuable things I think predictive SEO can do for any organization is start to predict the amount of opportunity and value there is to go after. And so, if you train it on a list of 3,000 keywords or 5,000 keywords, you can generate a list of, hey, these, here's 500 different pages we can create or optimize, and it's going to generate, $500,000 in traffic value. Now you can go back to your leadership team and be like, hey, we need 2 content writers or 3 content writers. We're not going to skate by with 1 content writer. And here's the math, and here's the defined value we can generate. And so I think that's another really interesting application of doing this, where like realistically today, when someone says, hey, forecast your SEO, it's really hard to do. You're like, well, I don't know. I guess we're going to have a 10% impact here. And, we're going to do all these things. And this is the guess. But like, it's really a hard exercise.
It is.
I think Google rolls out an algorithm and, everything goes to shit. So.
So Boyd Nord says, great presentation, and that was echoed through a lot of the comments. But I did want to bring something up because I know Boyd works for Nozzle, a rank tracking company, and one of the things that they measure, as well as some other of these top rank tracking tools, is like pixels, like how far is my organic positioning actually from the top, or am I not even showing at the top? Like I'm number 1, but based on the SERP, features, I'm not even visible when someone pulls up something for my keyword. So I wonder if both that, and I've been talking to some others as well about just like the possibility of using clickstream data to understand, like I was saying, jumping from my ranking predictions to what's that going to translate into traffic, right? Because I mean, there are some general like understandings about click-through rates in organic, but I think a lot of those that I've seen have been they're a little bit antiquated, right? They're assuming that we're still in the 10 blue links, like, and not this very dynamic changing scene. So I don't know if you've thought about that or what you think about that for the possibility of predicting beyond the positioning, right?
I love that. And actually, I hadn't seen Nozzle's SERP features yet, so I'm gonna have to go check them out. That sounds really cool.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, especially when you think about the other day, I saw a text ad with 8 site links that pushed everything down to like, the bottom 10% of my screen. I was shocked. There's also now text ads showing up in the middle of the SERPs. I don't know if anyone's seen that. It's been like a new thing over the last week or two. So understanding not just, oh, this is position 6, but this is position 6 and it's typically, 1800 pixels down the screen because of the text ads and all these other things. Like it feels incredibly important and pertinent to what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. And one thing about the tool, your tool, does it take into consideration so there's this idea of search intent, right? And the intent being defined by what I'm actually seeing in the search results, and going beyond just another great talk at Brighton was Stephanie Brigsby, I believe her name was. And she talked about the intent being not just informational, commercial, navigational, etc. But more of like, if it's informational, like what type of information is showing up? Is it image heavy search? Like, are people expecting to see graphs or like data in a chart, or are people expecting to see how-tos, or like just a lot more in depth than just those high level things? Are you taking into account that type of intent at this point, or have you thought about it?
Yeah, so we do evaluate. Not only do we make our own predictions on the expected intent in terms of like, is it informational? And then if so, is our brand positioned to satisfy the need, that informational need? So a good example that might be like, I don't know, if like we're trying to rank for the keyword Nike, but we're Amazon or something, like we can't do that. We can't create information that's going to satisfy the need of the searcher. But we also analyze the type of content already ranking. That's part of one of the things that our model does to help understand what matters. And so we definitely pull in some of that information. We definitely don't go as far as to say the type of content preferred here is, 80% text, 20% video, or what have you. But that's a really, really interesting idea, and we have all the raw data for it. So probably something that we should be considering, as we continue to build out our signals. We have a huge roadmap of things we're building right now, but that'll make its way on there eventually.
Yeah, I had noticed, I was doing a project for a client recently, and I saw in Ahrefs a feature that I hadn't noticed before, and it's just when you search for a keyword and you scroll down to the bottom, you're at a point where you see the SERPs, and there's like an AI feature you can click, and it breaks down by percentage, like what the actual, like what are people looking for, like what's the intent that's showing up, like 60% of these top SERPs are describing the benefits of said topic, and then 30% are showing the challenges, right, with it. And I've noticed over several different searches and like clicking on that there are different actual content intents too. So I don't know, I'm always thinking about the content, but I think that the process you described, as I'm thinking about the things that I'm working on currently, there's ability to do a lot of automation in this. So for people who are trying to put something like this together themselves, I think that your point about creating a Python script or what have you is very relevant. I think that there's no code tools like make.com and other things that you can tie in these modules from the API, like SERP APIs that you're talking about, pulling their own data from Search Console or Ahrefs or what have you, and have it run some of these functions at scale across all the keywords and come out with some cool stuff. So it'd be fun to come up with some, I don't know, like a spreadsheet that somebody could dump some data in as a template and get some immediate actionable advice from. That'd be cool.
Yeah, and I know we chatted a little bit about that too, and that's something I'm going to be working on over the next, probably the holiday break. But anyone who's on the mailing list, I'm going to be sharing some code that basically says, give me a spreadsheet with the rankings and all your factors, and it'll make a prediction for you. And
cool.
It'll be a much more simple model, but it gives someone a place to start.
Super. Well, that's great. I'm not seeing any more questions. Sally says she can't wait for that. Neither can I. That always excites me. I'm always thinking automation, right? Is there anything else that you wanted to share about your tool or about the topic? Like, what's the thing you want people to remember most?
So I think it's do things that don't matter. I said this 100 times over in the presentation, but we don't work for Google. Like, we're doing stuff in Google. We're creating content all with the purpose of this kind of unwritten handshake that they're going to send us traffic in return. And if they're not sending you traffic, you need to start questioning why you're doing it and change your strategy. And so there's lots of different ways to increase the confidence that, you know, you're going to get value out of some SEO activity. This is the one way that I approach it. And so I think that's the big thing. Do things that matter.
Yeah. You said that the other way before, like maybe he changed his mind after our conversation here. Do things that don't matter, folks. You heard it here.
It's a little too much coffee throughout the presentation, I think. So I'll
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for coming and joining us on this webinar. Thanks, Nicolas, for putting that together and giving us some actionable insights there. And we look forward to seeing that, seeing what you put together for some actionable sheet type of stuff. So.
And Ryan, thank you for co-hosting, for the thoughtful questions, and for helping me pull all this together. So really appreciate you.
Yeah, grateful we got to do it. So thanks everybody. We'll post this. You'll be able to see a recording, share it with everybody you know that it's relevant for. Don't share it with your mom. She's not in it. Yeah.
I'm definitely sharing this with my mom. Mom, I love you.
It was on TV. All right, guys. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.